we have just a potpourri of questions, all
Yeah.
of us do, and I think I'll let Dave start and begin with the announcement that's being made today by Site Selection Magazine.
Yes, I'm sure you've seen the ranking, not only for Sioux City, but for the state.
We're very
as
pleased.
well.
Well, first of all, that's why we're here in Sioux City today, because Sioux City has been named #1 by Site Selection Magazine for economic development for communities of this size, 50 to 200,000. I think you got that #1 ranking last year also. Now, I understand Dubuque is also tied for that,
Yes, that's
Correct.
right.
and also Council Bluffs, Omaha is also being recognized in their size category. So there's a number of Iowa communities, and I think it's a tribute to Debbie and her leadership, the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and what we've been doing over the last several years. And certainly it's a tribute to the local people here in the Siouxland. You've had a very successful economic development program. In fact, just to hit some of it, obviously CF Industries is the biggest one, and that's a huge 1.75 billion investment, but you've got Sabre Communications at 25.4 million. You've got Dennis Supply Company, Jackson Recovery Centers, Bumgars, Echo Electric Supply, and FEH. These are just the ones that the Economic
Right,
Development Authority has provided help for. I'm sure there's other ones as well, but Woodbury County's unemployment rate has gone down since I've been governor, 2.2%. Sioux City's metro unemployment rate has dropped by 2%, and the Sioux City unemployment rate is now it's down like to 2.2%, and the statewide unemployment rate has dropped 1.9. So the state's doing well. Sioux City's doing even better, really, and we're really encouraged. We're the 5th lowest in terms of unemployment in the nation. Actually, Lyon County's the lowest. They're the lowest in the state. So this end of the state has been doing particularly well, but really the whole state's doing well. I mean, Lee County, which had the highest unemployment in the state, they've dropped 40%. And of course, we've got that other big fertilizer plant being built down there. At Fort Dodge, you've got just recently Cargill and CJ, and there's just a lot of projects all over the state. And of course, you've got companies like Facebook and Google and Microsoft that have chosen to expand and grow in Iowa. So we're pleased, and I think the focus on economic development has really paid off. And you know, you haven't missed a beat here. Of course, Debbie still lives here, but Chris McGowan and your team has been really successful and done a great job. And had a big delegation was down and met with us at the Capitol, and so I just want to say congratulations, and we're proud to partner with Sioux City and with the Siouxland area, and to see more good economic opportunities come this way.
What from a practical, and maybe you could talk to this too, from a practical standpoint, does recognition in a publication like this? I know it's important clearly for us being #1, but for the state as a whole. You said there's some other communities that were in the rankings in different places. What does it mean when cities in Iowa get, from the standpoint of the state as a whole?
Well, the state is ranked #6 among the
Per
50
capita
states
and
too.
the governor's
So,
state,
so we're ranked 6th, and this particular publication is read by. This isn't just any publication. This is Site Selection Magazine. So the people that are in the business are the ones that read this. And you got a lot of ratings from a lot of different groups, but this one is important because the people that are advising companies on where to locate read this publication. So it is, I think, very significant from that perspective. There are a lot of ratings out there, and different groups, in a lot of,
Right.
Barron's and Forbes and all these different magazines kind of have their own thing, but this particular one is Site Selection Magazine. It's the site selectors who read it, so that makes this one particularly important. I guess they're all important, but this one I think is especially.
Dave, do you have any other questions?
questions?
Not a follow-up to that, no.
Then I wanted to move to the legislative session.
Yep.
Get your impressions on what's occurred so far, what still needs to occur, what your impressions are of how the session has progressed to this point, and what is still left to be done that you would like to see completed before.
We're
session ends.
encouraged about the progress so far this session. We have, again, like last year, a very focused agenda, and we're very optimistic because all of our major priorities are still alive. They've survived the first funnel, which is the first step in the process. One of the things that I really focused on early was the renewable fuel standard, and I went out and testified on that public hearing in the suburb of Washington, D.C. We had our own hearing in Des Moines, and we had people from 6 different states, a lot of great attendance there. We've had 2 meetings now with Gina McCarthy. I met with her when I was out there in D.C. for that hearing, and then when the governors met there a week ago, I also had a private meeting with her. And I'm optimistic that we're gonna see some change from their proposal. That proposal was, came out last fall. The comment period is now over. They got thousands of comments. We did our level best to try to generate a lot of concern and try to get them to update their information. In my last meeting with me, she indicated they'll probably make a decision by, say, sometime in June. We'd like to see it sooner rather than later, and we have pushed on that. And we've supplied a lot of additional information with the help of Iowa State University and with companies like Poet, just up at Sioux Falls, and others. And we've had great bipartisan support here in the Midwest. The governor of Minnesota, Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, the lieutenant governor from Indiana, the secretaries of agriculture from North and South Dakota and Nebraska, and pretty much all our surrounding states have been with us on this. And I think we've done a pretty good job of getting our message across that the renewable fuel standard has been good. It's been good for reducing our dependency on foreign oil. It's been good for agriculture and farm income. It's been good for jobs here in the Midwest. We have 42 ethanol plants. We have 12 biodiesel plants. We have 2 cellulosic ethanol plants under construction. One of them in Emmetsburg, another one down in Nevada. Reducing it would send a very negative signal, and of course it would not satisfy big oil that wants it repealed altogether, because they don't want the competition. They don't want renewable fuels, and they want to control it all. They always have. And of course, remember, in the early days, I've been involved in this for a long time, going back to when I was in the legislature, but in the early days, they were pushing MTBE in lieu of ethanol, and that poisoned the groundwater in California and many places in the East Coast, and so that was banned because of the damage it did, and that's how we got the renewable fuel standard then. And now that we've got to 10%, they want to put the brakes on and say, we don't want you to get past 10%, but I have a son that's got a flexible fuel vehicle, use up to 85%. I've been to Brazil where all the vehicles are flexible fuel, and where they have totally eliminated their dependency on foreign oil. So I just think that we need to continue, and it's taken a while for cellulosic ethanol to come into its, but it is, and we're going to have 2 of them in production before the end of this year in Iowa, and there's others around the country, and you can make ethanol not only from corn and from sugar cane, but also from corn stover and from switchgrass and from wood chips, and so there's and the ethanol production has become more and more efficient over time. The other thing is the big oil and big food that are against it, of course, they don't mention the fact that you have this huge byproduct, which is really important to us, called DDGs, distillers dried grain, which is great cattle feed, but it can be also used for other feed for chickens and swine and whatever. But that is one of the reasons why you're seeing cattle numbers, that and the drought, but cattle numbers in Iowa and Nebraska are going up, and they're dropping in Texas. I think Nebraska has now surpassed Texas in terms of cattle production. And our numbers in Iowa have been going up each of the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, speaking of Texas, Governor Rick Perry was here last Friday.
Yeah.
And I'm just interested in your thoughts on when he, or someone from an oil state like him comes to Iowa and they downplay the importance of RFS. It'll survive, it'll be fine. I support ethanol.
We disagree with it.
I mean, do you talk
He and
with
I
him? You say,
agree.
Rick, you know, here's the story on the RFS.
Well, yes, we're gonna have some in-depth, and there's potential that he might wanna run for president again. First of all, he's been a great governor. He served 14 years in Texas. Texas has probably had the most success in economic development of any state. Time Magazine had a story in their October 28th, 2013, United States of Texas, and they talked about how 30% of the jobs in the last decade went to Texas. They have no income tax, they have a very competitive regulatory climate, and he's a great salesman. And he's a good friend. We just don't agree on this, and I understand a little bit where he's coming from. Big oil is a big part of his constituency, plus he's also got the Texas cattle industry that's losing out because of DDGs. DDGs has made cattle production more economical here in the upper Midwest than it was. For decades we were losing to Texas, and now it's going the other way. So he's got 2 big constituencies in his state that obviously don't agree with us, but we have seen the benefits of the renewable fuel standard, and as you know, in this state, in Nebraska, and South Dakota, and Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, we all, and even North Dakota, and I've had some, Governor Dalrymple is a strong supporter of renewable fuel, even with the oil company, with the oil exploration they have up there. His senators, his congressional delegation, they are with us on this issue. And like I say, it's not a partisan issue. Okay, so Democrats and Republicans from this part of the world all see the benefits of the renewable fuel industry, and it has made a real difference. Farm income we've had some of the best years we've ever had since we had the renewable fuel standard. And last year, with the drought that we had here in Iowa, we had something that I had never seen in my lifetime, and that is, when I was a kid, growing up on a farm in northern Iowa, the price of corn was about $1.25 a bushel on the Chicago Board of Trade. But in our local elevators, we're getting about $1 because the basis. Because that's, and the further south and east you got on the Mississippi River, the better the price was. The further north and west you got, the worse it was because of the transportation costs for the international market. Now with the demand and with literally, we did not raise enough, and in Sioux County this has been the case for a long time, because of the cattle industry and the livestock industry up there. They're an importer of corn. They don't raise enough corn in Sioux County to meet the needs. But this was true statewide for the first time last year. We actually had to import corn into Iowa, the leading corn producing state in the nation, because of all the ethanol, because of all the cattle and hogs and chickens and all the demand we've got. And the result was, I would call my friend Alec Turner that I used to work with Robert W. Baird. They've got a ethanol plant down there in Corning, and I would ask him, well, what was the price of corn at the ethanol plant there? And it was as high as 70 cents above the Board of Trade some of the last summer. So the difference we're getting in now with the demand at Fort Dodge and elsewhere, and Eddyville, and the different locations around the state of Iowa, we literally are getting now sometimes 30, 40, and as high as maybe 70, 80 cents a bushel more than the Board of Trade price, which is, that in and of itself is a great thing for Iowa. And then all the jobs related to, when you have 42 ethanol plants, and they have an average of 40, 50 really good paying jobs. And then you have another dozen biodiesel plants, and now we have the 2 cellulosic plants under. So that's made a real difference in the revitalization of our economy, and especially in the rural areas where those kind of jobs are hard to find.
Well, sticking on the subject of fuel, but switching over to a different part of the fuel discussion, and that's the infrastructure in the state of Iowa, the gas tax, raising money for roads and bridges. Where do we stand on that issue?
I asked Paul Trambino to put together a whole series of options.
Right.
And he has done that, and legislators and the different interest groups have been looking at that and reviewing that. It's a delicate issue because the Iowa poll, and I'm anxious to see if the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll is gonna have something on that. They've had something on minimum wage now and on marijuana, but are they gonna have something on fuel? Last year, their poll showed people were against it 2-1. So it'll be interesting to see if that has changed. But that has been the challenge. And in an election year, obviously, you're gonna have to have bipartisan support. The last time we passed it, an increase in the fuel tax, when we passed transportation 2000, and that was in 1988. And I recommended that, but the way we got it done was we got a majority of Democrats and a majority of Republicans in both houses to vote for it. Then they couldn't use it as a political issue against one or the other. So we got a majority of both Democrats and Republicans in both houses. I think that's the only way you get it done.
Realistically, do you think that gets done this session?
I think it's gonna be hard to get it done this year. It needs to happen. This year, Paul, in the budget presentation, it's surprised, last year we had $600 million we spent in the primary road fund.
Right.
This year it's $700 million. So this is an all-time record, but then it drops off. And there's also uncertainty at the federal level as well. So if it doesn't get done this year, it needs to happen early next year.
Because it just seems like one of those issues that just keeps getting pushed off. And
Well, remember my predecessor threatened to
deficit
veto.
grows, and it just gets pushed off from year to year. Well, maybe next year. Well, maybe next year. And now another year will pass, and the deficit will grow larger, and it's kicking the can down the road. It
I'm
just
told,
seems to me.
and Kim Reynolds was in the Senate, that they had the votes back when to do this, when Culver was governor, but he threatened to veto it, and that killed it.
Do you feel like you should be leading on the issue?
Well, I
I
understand the politics of this, and I think if we can get the majority leaders in both the House, the majority leader and the Speaker, and the minority leaders to tell me they've got the votes in their caucus, I'm glad to recommend it. But for me to just go out, I know the politics of this, and I know that my predecessor thought it was good politics to threaten to veto it. So I've been around long enough to know that we're gonna all have to hold hands if this is gonna happen. And I'm willing to, and I'm working behind the scenes to try to see if we can get that kind of a coalition. I know it's important in this part of the state because of Highway 20. We wanna get that road finished. And that's an it's an economic necessity for this part of the state, but it's also gonna help us reduce the problems on 80 with the truck traffic there. So it's something that needs to be done, and I know that, we've got Mobile to Early now, or no, it's to Early, yeah. So that's the segment, it's what, 40-some miles? 44 miles. I'd like to be governor when that is completed. I know it's been a long time coming, and we've finally gotten the rest of it done. Now, so we have that 44-mile stretch needs to be completed, and the sooner the better. And obviously, if we get the additional money in the road use tax fund, that should be a priority as far as I'm concerned.
So you're in discussions with the leaders in both chambers?
We are. I have met with the leaders of the Transportation Committee, and I've indicated a willingness to meet with them again as we move along on this. Whether it happens this session or next session, it's gotta happen. Because, and I think we need to do it on a pay-as-you-go basis where the users of the highways that get the benefits pay for it. One of the concepts that's being looked at, and the other thing that's a problem with the gas tax, it's a diminishing source of revenue. Because what's happened is people have gone to more and more fuel-efficient vehicles, and they've gone to hybrid vehicles, and they've gone to electric vehicles, and